My fiancée humiliated me at our engagement party to impress her friends, so I ended it that night and watched her reputation collapse. Instantly, I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought my fiancée Vanessa and I were perfect for each other. From the moment we met at that stupid networking event, her laughing at my awful joke about coffee and spreadsheets, I knew she was different. She had this way of making me feel like my messy, overworked life was exciting. Like my ambitions and late nights at the office were somehow romantic. We talked about everything from tiny apartment dreams to the kind of family we'd build. And every conversation ended with us planning a future that felt tangible, almost magical. Our friends would tease us, saying we were a power couple, and honestly, I started believing them. I wanted to believe it too. When Vanessa started talking about the engagement party, I was ecstatic. She picked this extravagant rooftop venue downtown, lights twinkling over the city skyline, and insisted on planning every detail herself. I trusted her judgment completely. I'd always admired how meticulous and charismatic she was. The invitations went out, the menu was set, and I even let her convince me on the color scheme. Even though I would have gone with something a little more understated, I didn't care. I just wanted to see everyone smiling, celebrating us. It was supposed to be the perfect night, the kind of memory you'd replay for the rest of your lives. But then Vanessa made that offhand comment while we were discussing the guest list. "I just want my friends to really see how successful we are." She smiled, but there was this glint in her eyes that made me pause. I shrugged it off, telling myself I was just overthinking. Success wasn't really my measure. It was happiness, loyalty, being able to share life with someone I loved. Still, a small knot twisted in my stomach as the day approached. I couldn't help but feel this buzz of excitement, the kind that makes your chest ache with anticipation. I kept imagining the party, us laughing, friends raising glasses, and the night feeling like the perfect beginning. Little did I know, perfect beginning might be the last illusion I'd believe in for a long time. The week leading up to the engagement party felt like living in a whirlwind. I spent nights making sure my suit was pressed just right, practicing smiles in the mirror, and even double-checking the speech I'd give when toasting Vanessa. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for her, but for the people she cared about, and I hoped secretly for her to see how much effort I was putting in. Vanessa, of course, was in full control of the party planning. She called me during my late shift, rattling off last-minute details, from flower arrangements to lighting cues, all while making me feel like I was barely keeping up. I nodded along, even though half the time I had no idea what she was talking about. That was Vanessa, confident, charismatic, somehow always 2 steps ahead. Her friends were arriving earlier than expected, so she insisted I help with the final decorations. As we walked through the space, she ran her hands over the tablecloths and centerpieces, pausing to glance at me with that half smile that usually meant approval, but this time it felt different. "Make sure everyone notices us," she whispered. "Not exactly quietly, they need to see what we've built." I froze for a second, trying to read the tone. Was it excitement? Pride? Or something else? I tried to brush it off, laughing nervously. Yeah. They'll see," I muttered. Though a tiny knot of unease had settled in my chest, the city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I could hear the faint hum of traffic below. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the faint trace of vanilla from the candles. Everything looked perfect to perfect, almost staged. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself I was just imagining things. Vanessa's energy was infectious, pulling me along with her excitement. But even as I smiled and adjusted the silverware one last time, I couldn't ignore the thought nagging at the back of my mind. Maybe this party wasn't just about celebrating us, it was about her showing off. And somehow, I had become part of the display. I stepped back to admire the setup, heart thumping in anticipation, and suddenly realized that tonight wasn't just the perfect beginning I imagined. Something in the air felt heavy, like a warning I couldn't quite place. And as the first guests arrived, I felt the first flicker of unease, one that I couldn't shake. No matter how hard I tried, the engagement party finally began, and at first everything felt like a dream. Guests poured in, laughter bouncing off the walls, champagne glasses clinking, and the city lights casting a golden glow over the rooftop. Vanessa was radiant, moving through the crowd with that effortless charm of hers, introducing me as her amazing fiancée to everyone, but there was a flicker in her eyes I couldn't quite read. I smiled, feeling proud, trying to match her energy, hoping that tonight would be remembered as the perfect celebration of us. At first it was fine. People congratulated us, admired the decorations, and I even felt a surge of warmth when my parents hugged me tightly, whispering how proud they were. Vanessa's friends complimented the setup, all while laughing at her jokes, and I reminded myself to breathe. I was supposed to be the happy fiancé, the supportive partner, the man who made this night possible. But as the evening wore on, I started noticing subtle shifts. Vanessa made small, pointed jokes about me in front of her friends, comments about my career, my apartment, my boring hobbies. At first, I laughed along, trying to play it off. "Ha! Yeah, I guess I'm a bit old-fashioned," I muttered, forcing a grin, even as a flush of embarrassment crawled up my neck. Some of her friends chuckled. Some exchanged awkward glances, and I realized I was being put on display. It was a strange, sinking feeling, like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I caught Vanessa glancing at her friends after every comment, gauging their reactions, and my chest tightened. What had started as excitement was turning into anxiety. I couldn't shake the creeping thought. Was tonight really about celebrating our love? Or was it about her showing off at my expense? I forced myself to raise a glass, smiling though my hands were trembling slightly. Deep down, I knew the evening was about to take a turn, but I didn't know how bad it would get. And as Vanessa prepared to make her next toast, I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. A warning that tonight might not end the way I had dreamed. Then it happened, the first real sharp jab. Vanessa raised her glass to toast, her eyes sparkling with that mischievous glint I'd seen before, but never this intense. "To my amazing fiancé," she began, and for a moment I felt the warmth I'd been clinging to all night. But then she added, laughing lightly, "Who somehow manages to pay the bills but still thinks we can survive on ramen noodles every week." The room erupted in polite chuckles, some more genuine than others, and I felt my stomach twist. I laughed too, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself she was just teasing, that it was harmless. But the way her friends leaned in, exchanging looks and smirks, told me otherwise. I was suddenly aware of every eye in the room, focused on me, and I felt exposed. Like I was a specimen on display for amusement. I could feel the heat rising in my face, a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and disbelief. Vanessa's laugh was light, musical, but it hit me differently this time, sharp, cutting. She wasn't just joking. She was performing, and I was the punchline. "Vanessa." I started quietly, trying to pull her aside, but she waved me off, turning back to her friends with another laugh. As if she hadn't noticed my discomfort, I glanced around, catching the awkward expressions of some of our guests, some sympathetic, some amused, some unsure how to react. The city lights outside were beautiful, but I barely noticed them. The music thumped in the background, a heartbeat that felt too fast, too chaotic. I wanted to disappear, to crawl under the nearest table, but I was frozen, trapped in this surreal nightmare. A small voice in my head whispered that this wasn't just teasing anymore. Something had shifted, and I realized with a sinking certainty that Vanessa was using me to impress her friends, and I had no idea how far she would go next. By the time dessert was served, I felt like I was shrinking into myself. Vanessa didn't stop. Every comment, every laugh, every glance toward her friends was another little dagger, and I could feel my pride unraveling piece by piece. She leaned over at one point, whispering just loud enough for a few nearby friends to hear. "I hope he's ready for the kind of life I deserve, because, honestly, I'm raising the bar." I smiled tightly, forcing a laugh, but my chest was tight and my hands were clammy. It wasn't playful anymore. It was performance, and I was the unwilling star. Her friends giggled at every tiny jab she threw my way, exchanging whispered comments and sideways glances. I could hear bits of it. "Wow, she really has him wrapped around her finger. And is he always this?" Quiet. The words stung more than the jokes themselves. I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was I too sensitive? I tried to remind myself that love meant patience, compromise, tolerance, but the pit in my stomach told me this wasn't about compromise. It was about control. I thought back to the countless hours I'd worked to provide for us, the late nights, the sacrifices I'd made to make our life comfortable. And now, in front of everyone, it felt like none of that mattered. Vanessa's laughter echoed in my ears as she described in front of everyone how he tried so hard but just doesn't get social finesse. I felt frozen, the words sticking in my throat, my vision narrowing as shame and anger collided. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and sugar, the clinking of glasses sounding distant, like it belonged to someone else's world. I wanted to leave, to disappear, but I couldn't. The guests were watching, waiting for the next spectacle. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that Vanessa wasn't going to stop tonight. Neither was I going to be able to pretend that I was okay much longer. A quiet, trembling thought passed through me. Maybe this party wasn't celebrating us at all. Maybe it was a showcase for her. I was the entertainment. Then came the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about Vanessa. She stood up, glass in hand, and smiled at the crowd like she'd rehearsed this exact expression 100 times. "And let's not forget," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "how he once told me he couldn't handle my little quirk," and then, with perfect timing, she revealed something deeply personal about me, something I had trusted her with months ago. A secret I'd only ever whispered to her in confidence. The room went silent for a split second before the polite laughter began. It grew louder. I felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. Shock, disbelief, and betrayal hit me all at once, and for a terrifying moment, I couldn't breathe. Vanessa's friends exchanged glances, some suppressing laughter, others wide-eyed in amazement. The private trust I had given her was weaponized, turned into a spectacle for her social circle. Every ounce of loyalty and love I'd felt for her twisted into rage. I stared at her, numb. You can't say that," I whispered, my voice trembling. She tilted her head, smirk in place, and replied, "Oh, come on, it's all in good fun. They need to see the real you." Fun. She actually called it fun. My stomach churned, bile rising, and suddenly the room felt too bright, too loud, suffocating. I realized then that Vanessa didn't love me, loved the image of me she could control, mold, and show off to her friends. A cold, dark clarity settled over me. I had two choices. Let this continue. Let her turn my dignity into entertainment for the rest of the night, or stand up and take back control of my life, no matter the fallout. For the first time all night, anger replaced embarrassment. I could feel it roaring in my chest, sharp and focused. And in that instant, I knew exactly what I had to do. By the time Vanessa's toast ended, I felt completely hollow. Every whispered joke, every pointed glance, every chuckle from her friends had burrowed into me like nails. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to rip the ground open and crawl inside. My chest felt tight, my stomach churned, and my hands were shaking, despite my best effort to stay composed. I had spent years trusting her, believing in her, and now all of it was on display, like some cruel, public experiment. I found a quiet corner near the bar, clutching my glass so tightly it nearly shattered. I watched her move through the crowd, laughing radiant, oblivious, or maybe not oblivious, delighting in my humiliation. It hit me then. She wasn't just teasing, she was performing. I was the entertainment. My anger collided with shame and heartbreak, and I felt an unbearable mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Every ounce of trust I'd given her felt like a lie. I had been tricked into believing. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, late nights at work, skipped weekends, budgeting every penny so we could have the life we planned. And now, in front of everyone, all of it seemed meaningless. Vanessa had weaponized my love, my loyalty, my vulnerability, and she used it to impress a crowd that barely cared about me. A few guests noticed my withdrawn posture, some offering sympathetic smiles, but none could stop the spectacle. The music thumped in the background, sweet and celebratory, but it felt like a mocking heartbeat syncing with my humiliation. I couldn't breathe, couldn't laugh it off, couldn't even cry. I felt trapped, cornered by the person I had loved most. And yet beneath the despair, a spark of clarity began to form. I realized that if I stayed, if I let this continue, I would lose myself entirely. The humiliation wasn't just emotional, it was dangerous to my pride. For the first time all night, I understood that the only way forward was to take control, no matter the consequences. I finally found the courage to approach Vanessa, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I grabbed her wrist gently, pulling her aside where no one could overhear, though I knew it was already too late. "Vanessa, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the anger and hurt were barely contained. She turned to me, that same charming smile plastered on her face, and laughed lightly. "Oh, come on, don't tell me you're upset." "It's all in good fun," she said, as if the countless humiliations tonight were nothing more than a game. I took a deep breath, my jaw tightening. "This isn't fun. It's humiliating. You've been using me to impress your friends, and it's gone too far." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she still tried to laugh it off. "You're overreacting. Everyone's enjoying themselves," she said, her tone condescending, the kind that made my blood boil. I felt my hands tremble as I listed every single thing she'd said. Every joke, every jab, every personal secret she had shared for their amusement. Each word hit her harder than I expected, and I saw a flicker of unease cross her face. "You think this is okay?" I pressed, my voice louder now, echoing faintly against the rooftop walls. "You think humiliating me in front of everyone makes you look charming." Vanessa faltered for the first time all night. Her lips tightened, and she looked around, realizing just how many people had witnessed everything. I felt a sudden clarity, a rush of adrenaline. "No, it's not okay. It ends tonight." My words were final, deliberate. I could see her mask cracking, confidence slipping, as she realized I wasn't going to let this continue. And just like that, the air shifted. Guests nearby began whispering, sensing the tension, watching the confrontation unfold. I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. I was taking back control. And I knew that tonight, nothing would be the same. The moment I ended it, the room froze. Vanessa's eyes widened, her carefully curated smile faltering as she realized this wasn't a joke anymore. Guests whispered, their expressions a mixture of shock, curiosity, and awe. I could feel their eyes on us, but for the first time all night, I didn't care. I had reclaimed control, and the weight on my chest started to lift ever so slightly. Vanessa stumbled over her words, trying to save face. "Wait, what are you doing? This is ridiculous," she cried, her voice rising with panic. But nobody stepped in to defend her. Her friends exchanged awkward glances, some shaking their heads, others smirking at the spectacle. The reality was sinking in. The woman who had humiliated me, so publicly, had lost the crowd she thought she controlled. I walked toward the bar, my back straight, heart still racing, and let her flailing words fade behind me. A few guests whispered congratulations, murmuring about my composure and courage. Others, who had been entertained by her earlier jabs, were now watching her unravel. The balance of power unmistakably shifted. I noticed a couple of her friends trying to intervene, to calm her down, but their attempts were half-hearted. The charm she relied on to manipulate the room had crumbled. The rooftop, which had once felt magical with sparkling lights and soft music, now seemed surreal and almost surrealistically still. Vanessa's voice became a mix of desperation and disbelief as she tried to regain authority. But the crowd no longer followed her lead. The humiliation she had inflicted on me now seemed to boomerang, ricocheting back with force. I felt a strange mix of relief, satisfaction, and lingering hurt. The night had been a battlefield, and for once, I wasn't the one losing. I realized that ending things wasn't just about reclaiming dignity, it was about exposing the truth. Watching the facade collapse in front of everyone, and as I stood there watching Vanessa struggle, I knew this was only the beginning of the fallout. The next few days felt surreal. Word about the engagement debacle spread faster than I could process. Vanessa's friends, who had been so eager to witness the spectacle, were now quietly whispering behind her back, exchanging knowing looks. Social media, too, became an echo chamber of judgment pictures at the party. Snippets of her jokes and the public confrontation were circulating. She had spent so long building an image of charm, sophistication, and social dominance, and it was crumbling in real time. I stayed out of most of the chatter, watching from a distance, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and lingering pain. It was shocking, almost cinematic, to see how quickly her carefully curated reputation unraveled. People who had once fawned over her began to question her character, wondering how someone could publicly humiliate a partner with such callousness. Even mutual friends, who had remained neutral before, started siding with me privately, offering messages of support and surprise at my composure. Vanessa herself was flailing, desperately trying to salvage what remained of her image. She sent messages, called a few of the closer friends, even attempted to frame her behavior as just playful banter, but the damage had already been done. Every attempt to explain or justify her actions only made her seem more manipulative and calculating. People who had admired her now approached with caution, her smiles polite but distant. I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction. I had walked away that night, ending the engagement decisively, and now the consequences were unfolding exactly as they should. The woman who had made me the center of her performance for laughs and admiration was facing the social reality she had ignored. Actions have consequences. Yet, amid the satisfaction, there was still a hint of sadness, a recognition of how much trust had been broken. How close I had come to losing myself in her world. But for the first time in weeks, I felt free, untethered from the constant manipulation, finally able to breathe without the weight of her control. After the dust settled, I spent a lot of time alone, thinking about everything that had happened. It was strange. Part of me felt triumphant, having finally stood up for myself, but another part of me felt hollow, carrying the weight of all the trust and love I had given to someone who didn't deserve it. I replayed the engagement party in my mind, each jab, each whispered laugh, each flicker of her friend's amusement. It hurt, but it also clarified something essential. I had learned who Vanessa really was, and I had avoided a lifetime of manipulation and humiliation. Started noticing little things in my life that I had overlooked while being consumed by her world. I walked through my apartment and saw the photos of friends who genuinely cared for me, reminders of family dinners, quiet nights spent laughing and talking without pretense. I realized I had surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I am, not for what I represented in someone else's social performance. That realization brought an unexpected sense of calm. I also began to reflect on my own patterns, the ways I had prioritized someone else's happiness over my own, the times I had silenced my discomfort to maintain peace. It stung, but acknowledging it allowed me to set new boundaries. I started small, declining invitations that felt toxic, saying no when I didn't want to, and speaking my mind freely without fear of judgment. Each small action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Friends reached out, curious and supportive, asking how I was holding up. Their messages, warm and genuine, reminded me that I wasn't alone, and that there were people willing to stand by me for Manat, for the image I projected. I even found myself laughing again, quietly at first, then more openly. The way I used to, before Vanessa had become the center of my life. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The nightmare of public humiliation had passed, and I could finally begin to heal, rebuilding trust in myself and in the people who truly mattered. By the time Vanessa's social backlash fully unfolded, I had already begun moving on. The engagement was over. Her carefully constructed reputation had crumbled, and I finally felt the relief of being free from her manipulation. Friends and family who had been silently observing all along approached me with quiet congratulations, acknowledging the strength it had taken to stand up and walk away. For once, I wasn't the one feeling small or embarrassed. I was the one who had taken control. It felt exhilarating. I spent the following weeks reflecting on everything. The experience had been painful, yes, but it had also taught me invaluable lessons. I realized that my self-worth didn't depend on someone else's approval or admiration, no matter how charming or persuasive they seemed. I had learned to recognize manipulation, to trust my instincts, and to prioritize my dignity above social expectations. Each day, I felt a little lighter, more confident, more at peace with myself. Vanessa tried in vain to rebuild bridges with her friends, but the damage was irreversible. People whispered about her publicly and privately, questioning her motives and sincerity. I observed from a distance, feeling a subtle satisfaction not out of cruelty, but because justice, in a way, had been served. The woman who had humiliated me for attention now had to navigate the consequences of her own actions. As for me, life felt brighter, simpler, and more authentic. I reconnected with people who truly valued me, nurtured hobbies I had neglected, and even allowed myself to imagine a future with someone who would respect and cherish me rather than use me as a prop. The humiliation, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they were still memories, but they no longer held power over me. Standing on my balcony one evening, looking out at the city lights, I realized something profound. I had survived, and more than that, I had grown. I had reclaimed my life, my pride, and my voice. The nightmare was behind me, and ahead lay a future built on self-respect, empowerment, and the knowledge that I would never allow anyone to humiliate me again.